No crying. They asked us not to cry. We've made them happier than they've ever been before, Dylan. They said, please don't cry. We want you to smile. You have made us very, very happy. We have never been so happy in our time in Australia.
My name is Shannon. I'm 13 years old and I live in Bellingen, New South Wales. When I'm off school, I usually hang out at Mum's place outside town. Courtesy of Mum, I'm just about to plunge in the experience of a lifetime during the hot summer months, visiting refugees inside detention centres.
Rock the nation, rock the nation, rock the nation, rock the nation.
The experience of a lifetime starts at Sydney Graffiti Hall of Fame, where the latest touch is being given to the famous Peace Bus. The Peace Bus had previously driven to the Jabiluka blockade a few years ago and is now ready to embark on a new long journey and will hopefully lead to success. Our very first stop is at Villawood Detention Centre in Sydney's western suburbs. Like all migrant detention centres, Villawood has a long history of harbouring infinite accounts of human rights abuse and personal tragedies. It was September 2000, only a couple of weeks before the Olympic Games, that the people behind the fences would start a movement that would now reach the world's attention. A hunger strike started by detainees 2 weeks before the Olympics was going on for about 1 week, when the authorities threatened to take the children away from their protesting parents if they would not stop the hunger strike. While the parents gave up, the rest of the group, made up by single men, continues and lock themselves up in this room. Security guards employed by ACM, the private company which runs the centres, try to forcibly enter the room. However, the detainees had put ropes around their necks and were standing on chairs, warning the guards that if they came inside, they would jump from the chairs and hang themselves. ACM retrieved, but kept monitoring the detainees for another 3 days. After that, ACM cut off the electricity and running water. When the protesters asked why the water had been cut off, ACM delivered them spring water containers treated with tranquilizers. After consuming the water, the drug detainees became dizzy and sleepy. ACM then broke the door and viciously attacked the defenceless prisoners. Some ACM guards then proceeded putting the ropes back around the people's necks and threatened to hang them. Melbourne is our next stop. Dozens of protesters and well-wishers have gathered at the gates of Maribyrnong Detention Centre for a couple of hours before we arrived a couple hours late. 1 year ago, behind these walls, blood was shed at the hands of ACM when a detainee killed himself.
They're not going to be doing anything apart from staying up there. They have a list of demands and basically they're going to stay up there until their demands are met.
Can you see roughly off the top of your head what the first couple of...
Things like a full and expedient inquiry into the death of Willem, the Tongan guy who died recently.
Yep, nothing yet.
And an inquiry into the policy of mandatory detention and detention centres and the closure of detention centres altogether. So hopefully that's going to Philip Ruddock if he's around.
When you're talking about inquiry, I know there's a coroner's inquiry, you talk about...
That's what we're talking about. The problem is the ACM has started deporting the witnesses to the death. The police haven't interviewed any of the detainees. It's been a month. They've started deporting, 4 people have been deported already, and we are really concerned that unless these people are able to testify and tell the story of what happened, this whole thing's going to be a whitewash.
1 year later, the whole thing did become a whitewash. Until now, there have been 7 deaths at the hands of ACM.
And visiting hours are until 7 o'clock, and this is considered an awful lot of money, and they will need to give me a receipt. So we can take them in, but it's going to be during visiting hours. So the only alternative I have is...
Do you want to stay here, catch a train to Ballarat? We can do it! That was nice.
Personal differences among people started to become apparent. I think to hang out for the next 2 months on a crowded bus with complete strangers without killing each other is definitely going to be a bit of a challenge.
Like no other.
One of our missions on this trip is to contact people and create networks among refugee action groups around this country.
They're illegal boat people. They're not illegal, mate. Illegal boat people. They're not. They're in there. You turn that thing off, I will smash it. You read up about it, so you're educated and actually know what you're talking about? No? You're stupid. See ya.
the way the Australian government's behaving is absolutely, completely Nazi-like and appalling. The conditions that people are kept in are disgusting, and we need to free the refugees. They need to process their entry into Australia as quickly as possible.
Johnny Howard, where are you? Where are you? Come and play some music, you little fucking bastard. Radic 2, Radic 2.
We can take the toys into Woomera. We can't, but we've got someone. We can't, but somebody can take the toys into Woomera for us. Father Ron Davern is going to be taking the toys in for us.
He'll get them in through Father Jim and Sister Anne.
Fantastic. So we have managed to get those soccer balls for the kids. Yes!
Look at that bell they have there. That's cool.
Simon!
Yeah, mate?
I got more balls than you.
It seems like the word about the Freedom Bus has spread like wildfire throughout the communities. It's amazing where we're finding people that support us. I had a conversation with one of the solicitors in Adelaide yesterday that was trying to gain access to it for us, and I hadn't spoken to him before, so I introduced myself and I said, you probably don't know who we are, but we're travelling on the Freedom Bus, and he just laughed. And when I asked him what he was laughing about, he says, well, I'm surprised that you think that we haven't heard about you. Is there anybody that hasn't heard about the Freedom Bus? They have threatened body searches of the refugees if we go there.
Yeah! I see no criminals. I see performing political prisoners.
It's come through that if we make a presence at Woomera, then the next thing that will happen to the detainees is that the solicitors will not be able to go and visit.
Yeah! I see no criminals. I see performing political prisoners.
And also that the refugees will be exposed to body searches. And that's not, and by the saying that, that doesn't mean us actually going into the detention centre. It means going 2 kilometres to the imaginary line of where we can and can't go.
Yeah! I see no criminals. I see performing political prisoners.
And this is how they're managing to intimidate everyone, solicitors, the churches and the people.
Yeah! I see no criminals. I see performing political prisoners.
My name is Mark Huckstep. I'm a registered nurse. My experience is mostly in the acute care area of nursing. I first became interested in working at the detention centre at Woomera through a friend of mine who had been there, and she suggested that I apply to work there, which I did. I went to work at the detention centre at Woomera on the 6th of August in the year 2000, and I ceased working there on the 17th of February 2001. My impression when I first went to Woomera was, as I drove into the detention centre, that I saw the big fences, the high fences with the razor wire in the top, and families, ordinary families, mums and dads and little children, and I can tell you it was quite a shock to me.
Turn to centre on the left, everyone.
Really?
Over here.
Oh
my God.
You're kidding. Film this, please.
Oh.
Now what are you going to do?
Oh my God, you've got to get
There's a bus load of them going off duty. No, that's detainees.
Did
Was
you
it?
waving to us? No, detainees in that thing.
He said the police will be here in about 2 minutes. Can you tell us why the highway's blocked to us? Sorry?
You get as lucky as I do, girl.
Well,
Jeez.
I just... Look, airport.
I know, but not for us. We know. So we should have flown in. Then we would have been on the right side of the line.
How fucked is that? Seriously. See, look.
We stopped them and asked them would they normally be able to get in, or was it just our presence here that was stopping them access? As we got in yesterday, we've been allowed in. It's not a problem, it's because of your presence.
One of the days while I was there in summer last, it was 62 degrees Celsius. The guards had trouble staying alive, walking around their perimeter, doing checks, security checks. And at that stage, not all of the rooms were air-conditioned. There's certainly no comfort, and I wouldn't wish those conditions on anyone. And by the standard of any prison in Australia, I'd rather, if I had to live in those conditions, I'd much rather live in a prison than at Woomera.
Don't worry about it.
I think we need to free the refugees right now.
The terminology that the guards used were corrections officers and detention officers. Detention officer is someone, I gather, who is trained to work in a detention centre. A corrections officer is trained to work in a prison. Many of the people that worked at the detention centre for ACM were correctional officers, not detention officers. Particularly the first time I worked there, during the riot in August-September 2000. And I believe that this formed the basis for the way that they treated the asylum seekers, the residents of the detention centre at Woomera, and were partly, if not wholly, responsible for the riot that ensued while I was there, because of their because of the way that they spoke to the residents.
From the bottom of their hearts, because they know they're not alone. They said that ACM was playing really loud music so that they couldn't hear us. But they've got placards and things that they want to bring out tomorrow.
Yeah!
One middle-aged guard, the first time I was at Woomera, a small child had said something to him as he walked through the gate that was disrespectful. And he turned to me and said, "I wish I could have 5 minutes alone with that little C." And I said to him, "What in heaven's name would you do with 5 minutes alone with a child?" And he made the action of a punching action, as if he would punch him. And I said, "Well, wouldn't that make a big difference, being able to punch a small child because he's disrespectful to someone who locks him behind a fence with razor wire?" And I came quickly to be known as what the corrections officers like to call a care bear, because they preferred to be called by the name of head kicker. So there was the division between the care bears and the head kickers, and there was only one step on the chain, on the ladder, that was lower than the nurses who were care bears, and that was another guard who was a care bear. Some of the ways that they psychologically break down the people that live there is to not let people know what's happening with their case, their application for a visa. Their progress on their application they're not kept up to date on it. When people get visas, they have set days when their visas are the successful applicants are taken away, and those are Tuesdays and Thursdays. So the guards would come into their little hut, their donga it's called, and say, "Get all your belongings together, you've got 15 minutes, 8 o'clock in the morning." And by 20 past 8 you had to be on the bus. So every Monday evening and Wednesday evening, the people, in the hope that they would be successful the following morning, would get all their best clothes out and pack their belongings and they'd get up. They couldn't sleep all night from excitement. Early in the morning they would put their best clothes on and they'd pack their bag and they would wait, and the guard would come in and get. Some days it was none, some days it was a lot of people, some days it was a few, and then they would say, "On the bus now," and the rest would lapse back into this depression because they hadn't been successful. So there was this cycle of hopefulness and depression and hopefulness and depression and hopefulness and depression, which would drag on for weeks, months, in some cases years. There was a body of people coming to review the Woomera Detention Centre while I was there at one stage, Mr Flood and his entourage, and there was a hurried briefing called together by management, and it was decided to board up the kitchen and set up a temporary kitchen outside under a tent and tell the people doing the inquiry that the kitchen was being refurbished, because they knew that if it was seen in its current state that it wouldn't meet any health regulation anywhere in Australia, and that that it could adversely affect ACM's bid to have their contract renewed, because their contract was up for renewal, and that was what was done. The staff, the medical centre staff, hated going into the kitchen because of the rancid smell. It was just putrid. They break down people on every psychological level that it's humanly possible to break them down on. And one of the ones that I noticed while I was there, that supposedly for security reasons, there are the huge fences around each compound, and around the whole centre is another fence, a massive fence, a special prison fence that's got a roll of razor wire on the top and another roll of razor wire on the ground, short of having secreted a Sherman tank into the place. I don't know how anyone could get out. But for security reasons, there had to be 24-hour lighting. So when the sun wasn't out, in the evening, an hour before dark, they would, every 20 feet there was a massive diesel generator with a big like crane arm on it, and big floodlights. Every 20 feet, right around the whole perimeter of each compound, and these ran on diesel, and they were generators, and very, very noisy, very, very smelly, and provided 24-hour light, brighter than the sunlight. The people's rooms, their dongas, quite often were near the fences and near the generators, so there was no dark for them to sleep by at night because it was lighter than daytime. There was this low-level hum in the background constantly through the whole night, way before dark started, and up until an hour or more after the sun came up the next morning. And I have read suggestions by some psychiatrists, psychologists overseas, that low-level hums and lack of adequate darkness to establish sleep patterns would contribute greatly to a state of anxiety and depression.
They'll be glad to be rid of us.
Setting up to run is that the bus is going to get parked in the car park just back there.
I think there's been a bit of a miscommunication, because I feel that would be a breach of faith on behalf of the police.
I'm not into breaches of faith, I'm really not.
Yeah, well,
but the situation is, yeah, that's fine. The situation is remove the bus now, back to the car park, and we'll assist you to do that. If you don't, I'll write you an infringement notice, okay?
Right.
That's the instruction, that's the direction. You do it or I'll write the ticket. Do you move the bus back?
I'm happy to move the bus.
That's good.
Spoken to your superior officer, Ron.
I'm actually instructing you now to park the bus, otherwise...
I'll be back in one
sec, Ron. No, what? Hang on.
Hey, fucking take your hands off her!
Failing to obey my direction. I've given you the instruction about 6 times. Keep your hands off, otherwise you'll get arrested for hinder, okay? You are under arrest.
I've just had the news that the driver of the Freedom Bus has just been arrested.
On what charge?
We have the right to demonstrate. This is not a police state. Free the Freedom Bus.
can I speak to your superior officer? And he said, no, you can't speak to my superior officer, I'm putting you under arrest, and grabbed me.
This is 2BBB Bellingen Community Radio, and on the line today we have Stephen Kahn. Stephen Kahn is a refugee who is inside the Perth Detention Centre.
Where did you come from originally, Stephen?
I came from Kashmir,
Kashmir?
Indian-controlled Kashmir.
What forced you to leave your country and try to seek refuge in Australia?
I am fear from prosecution from the Indian government, and my tragic story begins in Kashmir in 1994 when I was 20 years old student in Srinagar, northern India. I've been informed that my father had been